The Clean Industrial Deal has emerged as Ursula von der Leyen's delivery on her promise for competitive industries and quality jobs. But does it stack up as the tool for Europe to maintain competitiveness, as well as security, in today's rapidly heating global context? You're listening to Energy Bites with ELS Analysis. Welcome to this week's episode.
This is our 9th episode, and I'm Carl Rosenberg, stepping in as host this week for Elena Kinsey, who will likely be back next week. Before we dive in today, a quick update. Starting this week, we're shifting our podcast release day from Monday to Tuesday, so keep an eye out for that. Joining me today are Shana Casas and Samuel Shishuk. Great to have you both here.
Hello.
Hello, great to be here.
All right. Now on to today's topic, the Clean Industrial Deal, which was officially released last Wednesday, if I'm not mistaken. This is the EU's latest industrial policy package, aiming to drive forward Europe's industrial decarbonization and competitiveness. But with much happening in both energy and, I guess, broader geopolitical sphere, some of our listeners may not have had time to go through it in detail. So to kick things off, Shana, what are the key takeaways from this deal?
Yeah, sure. Well, we have a lot to unpack today as we break down the latest, the EU's latest legislative proposals under the major-weighted Clean Industrial Deal. It's already been many years that the EU has been sort of like doubling down on the energy transition, but this time it's not about setting more targets, but about accelerating implementation, especially given the current geopolitical risks and situation. So the new Clean Industrial Deal introduces a wave of new strategies, funding schemes, and regulatory updates that I will try to summarize very much now. But of course, we are analyzing that in more depth internally at ELS and contrasting the impact of these for each sector. But today I will just go over some of these new 47 measures to call them something. So first, we know that this is much about competitiveness and decarbonizing the EU's industry. And so one of the main points of the Clean Industrial Deal is the Industrial Decarbonization Accelerator Act, which is coming at the end of this year, 2025. And next year, we will see the creation of the Industrial Decarbonization Bank, which, as it sounds, it will have a similar structure to the European Hydrogen Bank. And actually, it will also include the auction as a service mechanism. But there are more things. Some of you might know when we mentioned that on our weekly update, there was a leaked draft document a couple of weeks ago. And so the Clean Industrial Deal comes with a specific state aid framework that would enable this a quick implementation of the goals from the Clean Industrial Deal. And the final proposal should be coming soon. And this framework would grant faster state aid support to clean technologies, and it could exclude nuclear, as we analyzed on our post on our platform a couple of weeks ago. But for clean tech, member states would have more room to subsidize projects in that sense. But also, at the beginning of next year, the Commission is going to unveil the European Grid Package, which is set to improve network planning and investment frameworks. We know there is also the upcoming simplification of the CBAM very soon, but next year we will have a comprehensive revision that could actually expand its scope. Also, the European Oceans Pact is coming later this year, and it's going to impact the offshore wind sector deeply, and also Sustainable Transport Investment Plan. So I think I've already shared a lot of these new 47 measures, but before we discuss on how this is going to impact the market, I wanted to mention that the Clean Industrial Deal does mention the creation of different financing instruments, call them banks, call them funds. But the truth is that the money available is the same. So the deal talks about large amounts of funding for different purposes. And also last week we saw the unveiling of the action plan on affordable energy with the introduction of a new figure that's going to become very interesting in our current situation, which is the tripartite contracts. And we're also expecting a Great Europeans package coming this year. But also I wanted to end this summary on a positive note, and that is that the third European Hydrogen Bank auction has been announced for Q3 this year with a budget of 1 billion euros, which is more or less the quantity available in the past auctions. And also a hydrogen mechanism has been announced for this year also, which is going to be some sort of like platform that will connect off-takers and suppliers, especially for hydrogen-derived fuels. So I think that something interesting could come out from there if well implemented and used.
The CID positions decarbonization as the key to reducing Europe's energy costs and increasing security and competitiveness. During the last mandate period, however, discussions revolved around the potential competition with the US through the IRA and the global subsidy race with China. But that's not really where we are today. Isn't that right, Sam?
Well, indeed. I mean, doesn't the world change sort of almost every time you put on the news nowadays? It's breathtaking and not from very nice reasons. Indeed, I mean, we are in a completely different setting, and I think that is you kind of see most European leaders, and I reason to say, I suppose most Europeans a bit like deer caught in the headlight currently. These things, these issues, and I mean, we can go even further back. I mean, towards the start of the last commission's, the former commission's mandate, we had Fit for 55. It was so ambitious. We were meeting the climate challenge. We were sort of taking, doing what was needed, sort of, and really taking responsibility. And then it became a competitive issue, and now we just need to manage threats and the geopolitical setting, which is turned really, really unfavorable. And as somebody said, in media this morning, we're now in a 5% world. We're in a world where, in Sweden's case and many other countries' case, they already almost doubled their defense budgets in order to meet the old threshold of 2% of NATO, old NATO threshold of 2% of GDP spending on defense. So in the last few years, many have done that. Some still remain. And it's now pretty clear that we have to more than double again, because pretty much everybody's moving towards 5%, or maybe even higher. If we are going to rearm Europe, if we're going to actually have the capacities which seem like they might be needed, and not rely on the US to provide them, then and to do it quickly, then we need to look towards earlier periods of time when this was necessary, and for instance, before build-ups before or around the Second World War, when we actually had 10, 11, 12% or higher, in order to very quickly sort of get up to meet the threat level after years of dismantling. So that's where we are. So that is suddenly of the immense priority to have to field armed forces that are capable, and of course to be able to sustain them, and to have the kind of societal resilience. Now, energy will obviously be very key to this. The headline is maybe obviously buying weapons, building defense organizations, but then they need to be powered. Societies need to be resilient. This will mean a lot of energy spending, but on a completely different level. And I think we talked about this already. I think it was last week or before, that we see sort of spending on, or actually more like, where will different players find? Actually, there was when we talked about Germany, I think last time, where can they actually compromise? Where can they find room for maneuver from a budgetary point of view, nonetheless? Well, that will be around climate targets. That will be around different levels sort of investment into all that. So that is on one side. On the other side, of course, this resilience might also mean to make sure that we are not as dependent on international imports and supply chains from far away, and maybe some countries that we don't want to be dependent on. So that might mean actually doing what we can in our countries. So yeah, that's the mindset now, and that completely changes the priorities.
On that note, where will the money come from? I mean, the CID anticipates a new state aid framework to accelerate the decarbonization projects. And then, the question is, will faster state aid approvals give Europe a meaningful advantage, or do deeper structural issues remain?
Exactly. I mean, I think it's all very unclear. As I said at the beginning, the deal talks about large amounts of funding for different purposes, but in reality, the money at the European level comes all from the same source, and that's the revenues from the EU ETS. So, although it is true that the ETS could be extended to other sectors in the short or medium term, it is a bit uncertain how all these financing instruments, new funds, new banks, how they will happen, because it feels, at least for me, that the clean industrial deal is moving the money from one place to the other, but our funding capacity is limited.
And I think a reason for that is that the current budget stretches from, if I'm not mistaken, from 2021 to 2027 or 2022 to 2027. And the new budgetary negotiations are starting this year. So there might not be that much leeway to sort of restructure the current budget. Do you have something to add on that note, Sam, or?
Yeah, no, indeed, and I was thinking about this as Shana was talking here. I mean, sure, the Clean Industrial Act, Fit for 55, they are all sort of created in a very different setting, but maybe it's the state aid rules themselves that are really created in a very different setting. Very, a very good sound way of thinking. We were all trying to have a common market, but now we will have to solve problems very quickly, problems that are very different, very practical, in getting the most sort of armed forces standing up quickly and building resilience in very different societies in different parts of Europe at the same time. And there actually a lot of national, even sort of regional, subnational, local solutions will have to be found, which will be very different throughout Europe. And here the state aid rules might actually be one of the main obstacles for that. So actually maybe it's this sort of the common market, even regardless how good it is as an idea, maybe that is which needs to be generally step away. And of course, in a war economy, you have a very strong state. You have a completely statist approach, in fact. And even though we're not, hopefully, not throwing ourselves into a war economy out of necessity anytime soon, what we have to do in the coming few years will be much closer to that than to the sort of late 90s iteration of globalized and international European economy.
I think we can all agree on that this is very much a product from the last commission, the last mandate period. This is something that Ursula von der Leyen had promised to deliver on during the first 100 days. And there is some gaps here that needs to be filled, especially in the short term. And here Germany seems to have gotten the memo. Germany is now rushing to pass nearly 1 trillion in extra budgetary spending, with 400 billion earmarked for defense and up to 500 billion for infrastructure, and that includes schools and railways, etc. So right now, the CDU and the SPD do have enough votes to bypass the debt brake. But once the new parliament is seated, they lose that majority. And we spoke at length about the German election in the previous episode, so I won't go into the details here, but it is important to note that there is some uncertainty still with this proposal. The Greens, who are still needed to secure 2/3 of the majority, may block the plan, and they've expressed some concerns over this rushed special funds and are demanding more transparency and planning. But I think it's important to note here that this move isn't just about Germany. It could signal a broader trend in how EU countries handle industrial infrastructural investments. So the question is, will other countries follow?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's right, and I think you very good to point this out with Germany, and also to what we talked about just before that. How interesting to note this, how the world has changed. Right, this is Ursula von der Leyen, sort of what she brought with her from last year, sort of into her first 100 days, and how different that is from what Merz is bringing with him from the last few months of electioneering and winning, and now sort of bringing into his 100 days, and it's like a world apart, and that is where we are, and we are in a world apart, and we need to a lot of things need to be rethought. We will see very clearly much more. There's needed much more national problem solving here in order to just sort of build on what exists. There won't be time, the kind of bringing things together on a European level when it comes to societal resilience and defense building and all that sort of and civil defense, none the least. That will all have to happen later. Now, when it's of crash, we need to go into crash building mode, and that will have to be, done by those who are closest to what needs to be done, which is the national governments and subnational bodies.
Definitely, and I think that is a larger sort of problem within the EU, sort of properly tackling the governance issues, particularly in coordination between the EU and its member states. Without clear governance structure, there is a risk that industrial decarbonization efforts will remain fragmented. As we sort of alluded to before, this is a strategy that was drummed up in the last mandate period, and the Clean Industrial Deal lays out a clear long-term strategy for Europe's industrial transformation. But the question is, given the urgency of global competition, is this strategy enough in the short term?
Well, again, we're talking about the Clean Industrial Deal being all about implementation, but we are having new strategies and acts and directives which will also need to be implemented once adopted. So it is a short-term solution, not at all, but could perhaps the new state aid rules be? Maybe actually some reasoning behind these new rules that would only be applicable to clean tech is that since we have sort of stabilized after the COVID crisis, and now we don't have anymore the temporary crisis framework for the adoption of support plans for member states, this new framework could actually be a response to that need for short-term action, and actually states could find a way in that to give these urgent solutions to what we need right now.
Well, I think companies should be very proactive here. Actually, I think there's a major difference now, as we talked about, obviously, with Fit for 55, the sort of the Green Deal, all of that was an initiative of ambition, massive ambition, and everybody else had to sort of run to keep up. Now, what has happened here, the Commission, everybody really sort of is on the back foot, which means that we are coming up with as we talked about here, sort of is very, very unfinished and kind of early thinking. All these initiatives here are all still very malleable, and I think companies now need to need to lobby, need to sort of say what is possible, what capacities their projects, their business models could actually achieve in order to help resilience, in order to help make Europe better and function in the years ahead. This is a very malleable policy time we're going into in many ways, which could open up some opportunities. It's not only bleak from that point of view, I think.
Shana?
Yeah, well, what will I be looking at? I think that these 40 new measures are going to have me busy this whole year and the next one. But if I have to narrow it down, I'm very curious to see the content of the European Oceans Pact, if I'm honest. And also, I'm very curious on how the hydrogen mechanism will function in reality.
I'm going to, as a host, take the liberty to answer my own question. The EU is trying to balance its climate ambitions now very clearly with its need to industrialize. And I think policymakers need to have a good think about to ensure that the clean industrialization does not come at odds with the economic growth and global competitiveness. It needs to think about what metrics should we use to determine whether policy instruments such as the CID is successful or not. How will we know if Europe is truly becoming a global leader in clean industry? And I think that is very, very much, it should be at heart of these policy measures. And on that note, I think we're going to wrap it up. Thank you very much, Shana and Sam, for being with me today.
Thank you so much.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to Energy Bites with ELS Analysis. To know more about our advisory offerings, email us at els@elsanalysis.com or visit our website www.elsanalysis.com. Follow us on LinkedIn to stay up to date on our latest activity. We wish you a good and productive week ahead.